with today's edition of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. Today I'm here with UFC fighter and multiple-time BJJ world champion Beneil Dariush. Beneil, thanks for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. Beneil, he has a 12-1 MMA record, 6-1 in UFC. He's coming off a recent victory over fifth-ranked Michael Johnson at UFC Nashville. Multiple-time BJJ Nogi world champion. He fights out of King's MMA, trained with the Ralph Gracie team as well as the Gracie Baja team under Romulo Bahal. Very accomplished, all at the age of 26. Beneil, you've been busy the past 2 years. You've had 7 fights in roughly a 2-year period. What's it like not having a fight scheduled right now, not being in training camp?
Yeah, I had 7 fights actually in a year and a half, which was a lot, to be honest. It's nice because I get to kind of focus on healing up. I'm a little beat up from all the fights, so just trying to get a little bit healthy and then get back into the camp, or not camp, I should say, but get back to fight, because it is hectic when I have fights, but at the same time, it's when I feel most comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So is this time off by design to heal some injuries?
Yeah, I have like a slight meniscus tear where I need to do some physical therapy on it, and MCL sprain. They're nothing serious, but if I don't take care of them now, they could turn into something more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right now, you're by doing the physical therapy and resting, you're able to avoid any long-term surgery or any further damage.
Yeah, I actually shouldn't need surgery. I just need to make sure I get that physical therapy done well, so it strengthens the ligaments and muscles where I don't damage them again.
Great. Are you training at this time, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or in striking at Kings, or just taking some time off?
Yeah, I'm getting in about 2 practices a day. Saturday's one, but the intensity of the practice is a little different, I guess.
During your downtime, is it more just focused on acquiring new skills, fine-tuning stuff, and how's that differ from fight camp training during your downtime?
A lot of it is theoretical training, watching my fights, seeing where we can get better, what am I doing wrong, uh, uh, focusing on my foundation, like building on the foundation, seeing where it's weak, and just improving basically. And it's easier to work on your foundation when you don't have a fight. When you have a fight, you don't want to mess with it because it could ruin maybe your best weapon coming into the fight. So right now is it's a very frustrating time because it's hard to relearn. The hardest thing to do for me has been to relearn things. So, but at the same time, I'm enjoying it because I'm getting better.
And you've been known as a guy that you trained not only at Kings but with church boys. You'll go up to Northridge at times and train with multiple different jiu-jitsu teams at different academies. How do you break up your days right now and schedule your workouts?
Right now, I'm I'm at Kings Monday through Saturday in the mornings. In the nighttime, I move around, and then I have conditioning 3 times a week in the middle of that. So we're looking about either 3 or 2 practices a day.
That's pretty impressive, despite to be able to do that despite your injuries.
Yeah, the what I had to do was really take it easy with the intensity of training. Before, maybe every practice was maybe 8 or 9 as far as intensity, but now I'm looking at 5 practices, 6 practices, intensity wise, like a 5. Just focus more on technique and absorbing knowledge.
Mhm. And even though it's not the same level of intensity as your training camps, how do you maintain your body and take care of yourself? What's your diet like? What are you doing during your downtime to make sure that your body is healing and that you're able to maintain that 2 workouts per day schedule?
To be honest, I could probably eat much better. I'm still not so clean with my eating, but one of the things I've been doing a lot more is sleeping. I've been getting a lot more sleep in, and just I don't do practices over hour and 15. I don't go over that line. Hour to 15 is the max for my practices.
Mhm. And Rafael Cordero, he comes to that shootbox school. He's kind of old school. Um, is there a lot? And I asked Orlando Sanchez this: is there a lot more new school thought in not overtraining in MMA and taking care of your body a little bit more, not having to go 1 3 hour workout that wears
Um,
down your body?
I think so. I think he's evolving with the game. Master Raphael isn't just sticking to what he knows and going by that. He's evolving with the game. We used to spar so much. We used to do 10 rounds. Now we don't do more than 4 or 5 rounds. We make sure nobody gets hurt. We don't get the practices to be 2 hours. We keep the practices under 1 hour. Well, we're looking at a point of diminishing returns, and we're trying to stay away from that. And he's learning all the time, so that's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. And right now, while you're saying you're nursing an injury, if Joe Silva called and said, "Hey, there's a fight with another top 10 person in the lightweight division that could put you in title contention," would you have to say no, or would you consider doing it if it's, say, 3 to 4 weeks notice? Because there's a lot of interesting fights coming up in the lightweight division, title eliminator fights. Your teammate Rafael dos Anjos is fighting Cowboy Cerrone. A lot of, with the injuries in the UFC, a lot of things could change.
Yeah,
Could you be enticed into stepping in on short notice despite everything you're going through right now?
my injury is not so bad, so maybe if they call me, I would probably take it. I don't know if I could say no. We've had this issue a few times. The reason why I've had 7 fights is because I seem to have a hard time saying no. Um, I don't know, dude. Unless I'm in this situation, I can tell you. I can honestly tell you. So if they called me right now and they said, "Hey, you got to fight in a few weeks," I don't know if I could say no or if I could say yes. It just the only way to know if they call me.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes into my one of my follow up questions is you've taken a lot of short notice fights. Your first fight was it originally supposed to be against Jason High, then they switched it to Charlie Brenneman. You took that 3 4 weeks notice. How do you Are you always ready to fight, and do you maintain your even though you're working on technical aspects, do you feel like your cardio is always in a position where you could go 3 rounds?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. When they called me for the Jason I fight, and it was supposed to be at 170. Well, and then I got switched to Charlie Brenneman for 155. Back then, I was a lot lighter, and to be honest with you, when I was lighter back then, it was easier to make weight. That's one of the things that does affect your conditioning. As far as training, I'm always training, so I am always in shape. Rarely will you see me, not in the gym, unless I'm some kind of crazy injury. I'll be in the gym. I don't really have much else to do in my life. I'm kind of a boring guy, so that's one of the reasons why I'm always in the gym. And then yeah, staying in shape just comes with the fact that always in the gym.
And right now, you also just want to transition, staying in line with that whole gym talk. Church Boys Wrestling. How long have you trained there, and how do you find Church Boys?
I started going to Church Boys. I think it was in 2010, and Jacob Harmon, he's very special when it comes to motivation. He can motivate anybody, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of these champions are being drawn into because you meet a lot of good coaches, a lot of guys with a lot of skills, but there are very few people out there who can motivate you the same way he motivates you.
Mm-hmm. And how important, from based on your jiu-jitsu background, in addition to your MMA fighting, how important is wrestling in jiu-jitsu? And We see Home Alone, Edwin Najmi going down Church Boys, and Orlando Sanchez as well. Do you feel like pulling is soon going to take a step back, even in lower weight classes, and be replaced by more wrestling? And do you feel, as a jiu-jitsu person going into MMA, that you need to be more well-rounded than just jiu-jitsu?
I don't think people say you need to the best base is jiu-jitsu or the best base is wrestling. I don't think there is such a thing. I think it's your ability to absorb. I think the issue with MMA guys, for example, if you're a striker, you come into MMA and you're not really open-minded to the wrestling. You want to learn a couple of moves and just enough to defend the takedown, and that's it. You don't want to go further, and that's why a lot of guys will get stuck. Um, I think you need to take it to the next level, but more than just learning a little bit. You need to get lost in it. You have to be passionate about it. So I think it doesn't matter if you start out with jiu-jitsu or wrestling. I think as far as all the other aspects of MMA, you need to be passionate about all of them, and that's how you're going to be. I think that's how you're going to be well-rounded.
Mm-hmm. And just also, do you feel like you still train in the gi at all for jiu-jitsu? Where does that really not translate well to your MMA training?
I do train in the gi. It's just I think it translates. I think I was competing in no-gi tournaments back when I was doing jiu-jitsu, and to be honest with you, I would compete in all these no-gi tournaments, and I would train no-gi maybe once a week. I would just focus on gi, and it worked out fine for me.
And because right now with no-gi worlds coming up again, you just notice at my school, I train under Sean Williams, that we're still primarily just doing 1 to 2 no-gi classes per week, and that includes an open mat session, but we're still primarily training in a gi. So you believe that even if you do compete in no-gi, that most of your training should still be in the gi?
I think so. I did most of my training in the gi, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also a cultural thing. Everybody just does the gi. I think if more people did no gi, it would be more coaches taught no-gi classes, it would be more popular thing. If you train 6 days a week in the gi, and then one of those days you're like, hey, come to no-gi, you're so set in your ways, you don't want to change. I think that's really the issue. Most guys get so used to the gi, they don't want to change to no-gi. That was kind of an issue with me. Right now, I train much more no-gi, so to be honest with you, I'm more comfortable no-gi than I am in gi. I think finding a balance is really good. Marcelo Garcia, he's one of the best no-gi competitors, and I believe he spent most of his time training in the gi.
Mm-hmm. Just want to quickly transition a little bit. You've had a pretty successful run in UFC and in MMA in general, with 12-1 record. Now you're seeing some of your peers from your jiu-jitsu days, such as Gary Tonin, Kron Gracie, Gabby Garcia. They're all now taking a dive into MMA. What piece of advice would you give to them about making the transition?
Like I just said earlier, get passionate about all the aspects of MMA. Don't be so focused on jiu-jitsu. Be able to dive into striking, be able to dive into wrestling, and just kind of get lost in it to understand it. The more you understand it, the further you're going to get in MMA. We're never going to be champions if we just focus on one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Gabby's actually training with us, and she's improving really fast. I think she's going to do really well this year.
How hard is it for her to find an opponent? Has she found an opponent yet for her fight in Japan on New Year's Eve?
The Japan is the former Pride show, so that they have a lot of contacts, a lot of connections. I'm sure they can find somebody, and I think they have found someone. I think it's a girl from China, maybe, but I'm not. You don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure.
What has impressed you most about training with Gabby?
Her ability to learn and listen. She doesn't have an ego, and I think that's really helping her out.
Mm-hmm. And also, just her strength and conditioning looks amazing to me. You definitely seen a transformation in her body as far as the body fat loss. Have you done any strength conditioning workouts with her? And what could you say how fast she is, or how strong she is compared to some of her male training partners?
Physically, I think she's the strongest female I've ever trained with. That's a given. And as far as her conditioning or her workouts, she was in Brazil doing these things. Now that she's here, she's actually looking for new conditioning places. I believe she started with the conditioning coach of Rafael dos Anjos, the UFC lightweight champ. She's going there. His name is Nick Carson. I haven't seen her in action, but it's obvious. Yeah, she's an absolute athlete.
And you, like as you stated, you're training at King's MMA. She's also there, and two UFC champions, Fabricio Verdum and Rafael dos Anjos. When you decided to make the jump to MMA, what made you choose King's? And do you try out several different gyms before choosing King's as your home?
Um, so I went to King's, I believe, in 2009 or 2010 actually. Yeah, I went there because my uh, my uh, my jiu-jitsu coach at the time, Bruno Paulista, had told me about it. And I met Rafael Cordero one day at the Biggs in Cerrito, Babalu's Iron Gym. So what happened was I went there to train with Bruno to help him out with one of the fights, and I met Rafael Cordero. And the way I met him was very typical for us. I basically got beat up by him. I showed up to Babalu's gym, and he was sparring with all these big guys. He was sparring with Fabricio Verdun, Babalu, Bruno Paulista. Bruno's also at the time he was fighting light heavyweight, and I think it was Jason Mayhem Miller. He shows up, doesn't have a mouthpiece. He puts on gloves. He doesn't wrap his hands, and I'm just like, who is this guy? I'm like, this guy's gonna get hurt today. And I didn't know who he was, and I think it was like 5 minutes in, I start seeing, I think Fabricio Verdun like drop to the ground 2 times, and then after that, Babalu went down once, sparring with him, and then I realized, oh man, I'm in trouble because I I was next up in the on the list. So I sparred with him. I think he dropped me maybe 4 to 5 times in the short amount of time, and he wasn't even trying that hard. After that, I kind of thought to myself, man, this is the guy I want to learn striking from, and that's pretty much it.
You've seen a lot of your peers from jiu-jitsu that have made the jump to MMA. They've never really developed their hands or striking abilities, but yet within the King's MMA camp, you've seen Fabricio Verdum evolve from being a jiu-jitsu world champion, having all right hands, to having great hands, and especially from his last fight, 2 fights with Mark Hunt and Cain Velasquez. You've seen Rafael dos Anjos evolve from primarily a guy with a jiu-jitsu background to being an amazing striker who outstruck Anthony Pettis, who some thought had the best striking in MMA. What is Fabricio Verdum's secret to transforming guys with grappling backgrounds into great strikers?
Um, I think you mean Master Rafael, right?
Oh yeah,
Rafael.
my apologies, Rafael.
So Master Rafael's secret is that I think one of the big secrets is that he makes it fun. You get passionate about it. You start doing the striking and you start learning, and you completely enjoy it. I think that's been the biggest thing. I enjoy it more than I could imagine. I enjoy it just as much. Just as much as I enjoyed training jiu-jitsu with Homo. That's huge for me. Homo is my hero when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So being able to do that, I think that helped me out a lot. I spend so much time. I spend so much more time thinking about striking outside of my practice, and I spend so much time practicing it too. So I think that's been the real secret. He makes all these guys passionate about striking. He puts a lot of effort into it, and he gives them love basically. I think a lot of coaches are just coaches. He tries to be a father to us too.
Hmm. And what is, if you were to say what the big three biggest technical takeaways you've taken away from training at King's MMA in terms of striking, what are the top three technical things you've learned there for as far as striking goes?
That's complicated, I guess. Technical things. Defense has been huge for me. I used to my striking. I had a decent offense, but I would always get hit after. It was me hitting them and then them hitting me. That was kind of what my striking was. So one of the biggest things has been defense. He's focused a lot on my defense and just making me move my head, making me defend punches, making me stay at a range where I can hit them while they can't hit me. That's been one of the things. And the style at King's MMA is offense, so that just comes naturally. But for me specifically, we've spent a lot of time on defense.
Hmm. And just going back to just transitioning from jujitsu to MMA, when did you hire a manager, and how much did your manager have us in guiding your career? Because I think you skipped the amateur fights altogether and went straight to the pros, right?
Yeah, I never had any amateur fights, and to be honest, I didn't really have a manager until maybe 6 months before the UFC. Homolo introduced me to Ali Abdelaziz, who's my manager now, and before that, I would find fights myself, and I would just go and fight. My first fight, I the reason why I fought my first fight was my former jiu-jitsu coach, Bruno Paulista, called me one day, and he was like, "You want to fight an MMA fight?" And I didn't want to sound scared. I didn't want to be the guy that says, "Oh, no, I'm good. I don't want to fight." So I was like, "Yeah, I'll take the fight, no problem." And a month later, I'm fighting a professional fight, which I didn't realize was professional.
And during the early days as a pro, did you have a hard time finding fights because you do have that reputation as a multiple-time world jiu-jitsu champion in nogi? If certain pro fighters only have one or two fights under their belts and they only trained in MMA for a short period of time, they may be reluctant to fight someone like you. Did you have that tough time finding fights?
Uh, so it was always like this. It wasn't that it was a tough time finding fights. It was finding certain fights. I was always looking for someone with a good record, with you know, with good experience, so I can get a good fight. And I would we would get these fights. I would get a guy who's 4-0 or 4-1 or 5-1 with a good record, and then come a few weeks in, he would bail on me, and then I would have to find my opponent would be somebody whose record wasn't so good. Maybe they had a losing record, and I'm still grateful to these guys because they took the fight, and they because of them my career was able to move forward. But that was the most difficult thing, finding guys with good records to fight.
Mm-hmm. And once you hired Ali as your manager, he's also manages, I believe, Henzo Gracie and Frankie Edgar and a few of the Ricardo Almeida guys. What was the biggest change once you hired him in terms of networking and sponsorship?
Um, I had networking and sponsorship. I think that's basically that's the biggest thing. I didn't really have any sponsors back then. Once Ali came around, I started getting sponsors for my fights, and just he's been hooking me up with he has a great network. So yeah, and through him I have one too.
Mm-hmm. And basically, when we've seen some, again, going back to the whole transition from BJJ to MMA, we've seen different um, BJJ guys that go to MMA. They spread themselves too thin. We say Andre Galvao, when he was fighting in Strike Force, he was running autos, he was training, he was still coaching a lot of classes. What changes did you make since you've made to the UFC? Are you still coaching? Do you try to budget your time a lot better just to focus on workouts and recovery? Are you still doing seminars?
When I first started in When I first started making my move to full-time MMA, I was teaching a lot. I was teaching actually a lot all the way up to the Carlos Diego fight. I was teaching full-time. I think I shouldn't say full-time. I guess I was teaching. I was teaching about 10 classes a week, 7 to 10 classes a week.
Mm-hmm.
Once that fight went through, and I got to a point where I was financially able to just focus on training, I just stayed focused on training. To be honest, I do like teaching, but it's very difficult. It's tiring. It's especially mentally, it's draining. So after I teach a class, it's so hard to go train. It's something you have to build. So um, I don't know how much Andre Arlovsky was doing, but I can tell you that it's not easy.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Hopefully, I didn't misspeak, but I was referring to Andre Galvao,
Oh,
because
sorry,
back in
my
because
fault. Yeah, I
oh
was
no,
thinking
I
Arlovsky.
misspoke earlier. Um, but what was the big change? Was it just a fight of the night bonus? Was it just better paychecks? Was it steady sponsor income that allowed you to find that financial freedom to just focus on training?
It was just because I fought a ton of times. Just so many fights back to back. I had so many paychecks that kind of saved me.
Mm-hmm. And many fighters have spoken out against the new UFC sponsorship. Has it impacted you in a negative or positive way? The Reebok deal and apparel deal.
The Reebok deal, it's I'm thinking of it as a long run deal. To be honest, my before I would get sponsors, but they weren't really sponsoring me. They were sponsoring a certain segment on the UFC timeline of the fights. Beneil Dariush is fighting at this time. Well, this time is worth this much money. We'll give him this much money. They weren't sponsoring me as an athlete. They were just sponsoring the time I was in the UFC. At what point will I go on the air? So what I'm hoping for eventually, I'll find sponsors that are looking to sponsor me for me and pay me for me and being able to use my image instead of just the UFC's image, because they weren't really paying me. If you think about it, they weren't paying me for my image. They were paying the UFC for their image. They were paying me for the UFC for their image because I had a time slot in the UFC. So looking at it that way, I'm okay with the Reebok deal. I think it's fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to grow. That's another thing. I'm looking to see where this deal will be in a year from now.
And in part of sponsoring you for you, have you and your management team talked about how you can improve your PR? Any ideas on vlogs where, appealing and being the Iranian American champion, were really broadening your reach to the Middle Eastern community?
Um, to be honest, I don't focus too much on that stuff, and which I should. I'm having so many fights back to back. I've been kind of busy, but that's something I've started doing more now. We're getting more into the public eye and just kind of talking with everybody. Just one one of the worst things about me is I get so caught up in my training I don't leave my house. I'm at the gym. I'm at my house, and now we're slowly starting to move out. I'm going to more functions, and I'm going to more like you said, seminars, these kinds of things, and I'm hoping from there I'll eventually something will happen. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm doing okay. I'm happy that I'm healthy, and because of that I'm healthy. I'm able to provide.
Mm-hmm. And you've competed against Gary Tonin before. What do you assess his MMA prospects as? Do you see him as a guy that could evolve into a striker, or do you see him as a more submission specialist? Do you see him as well-rounded as you have become in MMA?
He's new to MMA, so I think obviously he's going to specialize in his bread and butter, jiu-jitsu. Only time will tell as far as if he's going to become more well-rounded. It depends where he's training, and it depends how passionate he becomes about the other aspects of MMA. I think he can go really far just based on his skill set. His leg locks are very good. His general jiu-jitsu is very good. I think he's going to be fine. But I think if he wants to become great in the sport, he's going to have to find good striking coaches, good wrestling coaches, which he might already have. I don't know, but that's my assessment.
Yeah, and he's with that Ricardo Almeida team, and they do have that guy Mark Henry who's worked with Frankie Edgar, Edson Barbosa, and Marlon Moraes. So all three are pretty good strikers, and he seems like a. Would you say that Gary, from your competitions with him, feels like a very strong athlete, a guy that could grow into that from just an athletic standpoint?
For sure. And man, if he's working with Mark Henry, he's going to be fine. So the only advice I have for Gary is, man, listen to everything Mark tells you, because look what he's made of Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar he was a wrestler. Now you don't know if Frankie Edgar is a striker or a wrestler. If you watch Frankie fight, you wouldn't be able to tell. So my only advice is to just listen to your coaches, and I do think so. Gary, when I grappled with him, he was very strong. He was strong and intelligent. It wasn't just he didn't win by brute strength. He beat me very technically.
Mm-hmm. You had a great grappling match. Where use of grappling in your UFC fight against Jim Miller, who's been known as one of the best jiu-jitsu games in MMA. What really changed for you in your jiu-jitsu style for MMA versus sub only or IBJJF? Was it just top position or playing half guard more, butterfly guard? What were the biggest transitions you had to make in your training and also just application in the fights?
One of the things is be aware of punches. That's been kind of huge. Another thing is with your guard, you have to play a different guard. You can't play such an open game, which I used to do. I used to play open guard, and I was very fond of my open guard. But now I've changed to it where I play a lot more half guard, close guard. Those are really my two weapons when it comes to my ground game off of the back. I focus more on my half guard for sweeps and stuff, and my close guard for submissions. And if I'm in open guard position, I just try to get up. I don't really focus on anything else. And with my top game, it's it's become even more basic, because when you first learn jiu-jitsu, everybody tells you make sure you focus on position before your submissions, and it's the same thing for me right now. I have to put extra time into the positioning, making sure everything's right, and then moving on to the next step.
How much time and repetition did it take for you to adjust for strikes and also to start conditioning your mind to an open guard, just stand up and get away rather than try to play a De La Hiva or a Margarita type open guard?
So
Go
I
in.
was I was doing MMA part time for even when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, so that kind of helped out. But to be honest, it took me a year before I got really comfortable with everything.
Mm-hmm. And what did you attribute that to? Did you just, was it more training at King's? Was it your MMA training partner telling you you can't get away with this in MMA, or you have to Rafael or Fabricio Verdum saying you need to adjust this or you need to work on
Yeah,
this?
it was, to be honest, more trial by error. I train with these guys, and they're punching me, and a lot of my techniques aren't working. A lot of the things that I love to do, I can't seem to do. So it was more of a trial by error kind of thing. I'm training with Fabricio Verdum every day, Rafael dos Anjos every day, and every day I'm getting beat up because I'm choosing to play a fancy open guard, or I'm choosing to play a loose top game where I'm trying to do like fast passes and stuff like that instead of going to half guard. So a lot of it had to do with just getting beat up and realizing it's not going to work.
And how would you assess the level of jiu-jitsu or quality of jiu-jitsu in the UFC? Because overall, some say it's not, it's just okay. But in the lightweight division, you have a lot of black belt or high level guys. You have your teammate Rafael dos Anjos, who's a black belt. Then you also have guys like Cowboy Cerrone, who may not have a formal belt ranking, but has submitted quite a few people.
The level I think in MMA right now is it's not as high as because jiu-jitsu guys look at it and they say it's not the level is not that high, but I think it's actually pretty decent because it takes a different style of jiu-jitsu, especially in the UFC. I think for my division, I think it's the level is really good. If you see guys, MMA guys doing Brumbelow in in training, you're gonna think to yourself, what is this guy doing? This isn't gonna work for his fight. So what happens is an MMA guy walks into a jiu-jitsu gym. He trains with the jiu-jitsu guys. He does only the basics, and because of that, a lot of times you get this idea that those guys aren't very good at jiu-jitsu. But if you were to do MMA jiu-jitsu with these guys, you would see that they actually have they have the right mindset.
Mm-hmm. And continuing down his path, we're seeing Ryan Hall. He's caught two people. Have you been watching Tough lately?
Yeah, I've seen his fight. To be honest, I watched just because everybody's been talking about him so much.
Yeah, he's gotten two people with that Imanari roll to footlock heel hook setup. Will that work in a long term where if he's facing someone, say, from a camp like yours who has 2 to 3 months to prepare and could bring in a footlock expert where has the BJJ chops that you and some of your teammates have, is it easy to counter at that point, and will he need to rely on his strike game? And how far could it take him?
It's hard to tell because he's so good at that position. That's his bread and butter. So I think it's really hard to tell. But I think if you watch the fight so far too, he was actually throwing some strikes in there. He mixed it up really well. He would throw some strikes, and the guy would be like, "Oh, what? This guy wants to strike," and then boom, he would go to the leg. So I think his ability to change levels, change from jiu-jitsu to striking, from striking to wrestling, wrestling to jiu-jitsu, that's going to be key. His specialty will always be his leg locks, but if someone is only thinking about defending a leg lock, it's going to be very hard for him to get it. But now, if he can bring in the other aspects and make you stop thinking about the leg locks, I think he's going to be very successful. And I already see him doing that, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of it.
Mm-hmm. In our school, and with the going back, we had a bit of a change where we're focusing on footlocks more in our curriculum, and you're seeing it more in events such as EBI, Polaris, Metamoris, where footlocks are kind of the in thing now. Have you guys at Kings or in your jiu-jitsu training focused more on footlocks and footlock defense?
I actually always focused on footlock and footlock defense. When I was in jiu-jitsu, ankle locks, straight ankle locks, with toe hold seemed to be what everybody was going for on me because of my style of guard. It was always open, and so I have to be super safe, and that's why I always focused on the defense.
Mm-hmm.
What I should have done back there was though become more familiar on doing them, which I've started doing now. But yeah, because of this big evolution of footlocks and ankle locks, even Kings MMA is a little bit more aware.
Mm-hmm. And right now, while you're healing up, there's only, because we're about to wrap up, there's only 2 fighters in the lightweight division that currently don't have fights on the schedule. Of course, you already said that you may fill in case someone does go down, but the 2 fighters that don't have fight schedule are in the top 10 are Edson Barbosa and Miles Jury. If Joe Silva called you, would you be interested in fighting either one, and does one interest you more than the other?
Either one's fine. I'd be fine with fighting both of them, to be honest with you. They're both really good guys, and the whole point is to test myself. Edson Barbosa is one of the best strikers in the division, and Miles Jury is one of the most well-rounded guys in the division. So I'd love to fight both of them.
Mm-hmm. And I was doing some research on you last night to prepare for this podcast, and Gracie Magazine a few years ago, you said your motivation to move to MMA was financial in order to help support your family both here and in Iran. Is that still your primary motivation, or has it changed a little bit since you've gotten a few fights under your belt?
Yeah, I shouldn't say I shouldn't say it's my primary motivation, because if it was to support my family, it would make much more sense to go get a regular job and work 9 to 5. But I loved MMA. and because I loved it so much, and it allowed me to provide for my family. So the primary motivation is just love for the sport. And yeah, another thing is, I'm a Christian, so there's that too. I get a platform by doing MMA, and I think I can honor and glorify God. So that's always been the thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And I also read that you once said that you would be retired by the age of 25. You're 26 now. How have your retirement plans changed? Your goals
That was
changed?
for jiu-jitsu. That I would originally I had plans to retire at 25 for jiu-jitsu,
All right.
and I retired earlier than I thought. I retired at 20, 22, 23. I think I got my black belt, and I retired. I was hoping to compete 2 years at the Mundials, just because I thought I could win with 2 years and then move on to MMA. But financial troubles came in, and I had to move to MMA a little sooner.
We see Ben Henderson competing at ADCC and also doing some of the IBJJF tournaments. Do you have that itch at all to maybe go back to IBJJF while you're still competing in MMA?
Man, I gotta give Ben Henderson a lot of credit because he's so cool. He just jumps in and he competes at these tournaments. That's huge. Right now, I don't train as much grappling as I should, so I never feel confident to do it. I'm one of those guys where I'm like, if I want to do something, I have to do it I have to do it every day, and I got to be the best at it before I jump in there. So you see Ben Henderson, he walks in and he walks in confident, like he's going to win, and he just goes out there and competes. It's really cool. I think that shows that shows how much confidence he has. So maybe one day, but right now I just don't don't see myself confident enough.
Mm-hmm. And basically, you're a smart guy. You have a loving family. What do you see yourself doing after your MMA career is over?
I think I'll definitely have established my own gym because, like I said earlier, I do like teaching. So that would definitely be one thing. But to look that far ahead, I don't know. I'll just put it in God's hands and just move forward. Whatever I have to do, I'll try to do the best I can.
Nice. Well, we're just about to wrap up. I've noticed all the belts and medals in the background. I think you got to build a shelf though for the UFC title.
Yeah, maybe, to be honest with you, this wasn't my idea. One day I showed up, my mom had taken all the medals out of my drawer, and my uncle put them all on the wall. So they actually kind of scare me because they were right over my bed. I'm like, if an earthquake comes, I could be killed by medals. That would be a horrible way to go.
It looks pretty tight. But thank you very much, Beneil. Best wishes to you, to your family, and to the whole Kings MMA team. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks, Jerry. Take care, bud.
Take care. And